Texas, Kansas City, Kansas, another Houston. Welcome everyone, and it looks like just about everyone's in from the waiting room, so I'll go ahead and officially get us started. Hello, my name is Sarah Coles. I'm the Executive Director of Texas Children in Nature Network. Thank you so much for joining us for our webinar today with Freya McGregor from Birdability. We are very excited to be sharing this webinar on how we can make our outdoor spaces more accessible. We are recording today's session, and we ask everyone to turn their cameras off and mute themselves during the presentation. I'll be monitoring the chat, so you can share your questions there, and I'll share them with Freya. Julia Hill is running tech for us today. Thank you, Julia. We are recording today's session, as I said, so I will share it tomorrow in an email. If you're uncomfortable with your name showing, you can change your name to anonymous and private message Julia with your name so that she can take attendance. And I'm going to go ahead and do our land acknowledgement. Texas Children in Nature Network is headquartered in Austin, and as such, I am on the ancestral and unceded land of the Tonkawa, Cherokee, and Sauna people. Our ongoing colonial presence on Indigenous lands compels us to take action now to counteract the effects of colonization. The work we do through the Texas Children in Nature Network is one small step towards that effort. I'm going to put a little bit of information in the chat about land acknowledgements and about the peoples who lived here in Austin. Please feel free to check those out. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Freya. Thank you so much.
Hi everyone, thanks Sarah, and thanks everyone for being here. My name is Freya McGregor, my pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am going to share my screen with you all. So hopefully you know why you're here. It's because you want to learn a little bit more about birdability. We believe that birding and the outdoors is for everybody and everybody. I'm the Birdability Coordinator, and I'm also an occupational therapist. And if you don't know what that is, most people don't, occupational therapy is a healthcare profession that's all about trying to enable independence in activities in people's everyday lives that give them meaning, like looking at birds or listening to birds, that they have some difficulty doing, usually because of an injury, illness, or disability. So that has some relevance to what we're doing at Birdability. So Birdability is a brand new nonprofit. We became a nonprofit in January this year. It's very exciting. And our vision is that birding truly is for everybody and everybody, regardless of disability or other health concerns. And our mission is to share the joys of birding with people who have disabilities and to ensure birding is accessible to everybody. By the way, I'm going to describe or read aloud everything that's presented visually in this presentation. So if you have blindness or low vision or a migraine, or you otherwise need to look away from the screen or can't see the screen, you won't miss anything, so don't worry about that. But for those of you who can see the screen, what do you see in this photo? I see a bunch of folks who are using wheelchairs. They're all manual wheelchairs, although there's a couple of different kinds. A couple look more kind of rugged, off-road maybe. There's one person who's standing. It's definitely worth noting that not all disabilities are visible. They all have binoculars. They're all looking in different directions, probably at birds, and they seem to be on an accessible trail. Now, I can't see the rest of the trail, but the bit I can see is flat and wide and concrete. So that's a good start. And we're going to learn a little more about what makes a truly accessible trail in a short while. And I just really love this photo because it just looks like folks are having fun and having a good time and outside in nature. So what do we know? Why is this important? We know that time spent in nature is good for us. A lot of people just inherently know this. If you go out for a walk, or if you go into the woods for a weekend or something, a lot of people know they feel a bit more recharged and refreshed afterwards. But there's a growing body of evidence that supports this. We know that it increases feelings of calmness, decreases feelings of anxiety. There's increased attentional capacity from even just 10 minutes spent sitting on a bench in a garden. Attentional capacity is basically how much brain space you have to focus on something. So that's appreciated by a lot of us. And so we know that time spent in nature is good for us. We also know that birds can be the gateway for a lot of folks to spending time in nature. They have really brightly colored different plumage. They make all kinds of interesting and strange sounds. They can fly. A lot of folks find that birds are really cool, and that's the reason that they want to go out in nature, is to go and find some more birds and enjoy those birds. We know that birding is the fastest growing leisure activity in the US, and this statistic is 21 years old, but in year 2000, 85 million Americans identified birding as a hobby or bird watching. And we know that that number has massively increased during the pandemic. A lot of folks noticed birds outside their windows when they were stuck at home and had some of their freedoms taken away. Birds were free and beautiful and exciting and calming, and they were right out there and people could enjoy them. So we know that as well. And we know that birding has the potential to be inclusive and accessible. We also know that 1 in 4 Americans has a disability. 1 in 4. That's not a small group of folks, including 20 million who have some kind of mobility challenge and 7 million who are blind or have low vision. We also know that this is about our future selves. This is not a conversation. If you don't have a disability or other health concern, this is not an us and them conversation. This is about all of us. I know when I'm 95 years old, it's pretty likely that I won't be as active as I am now, but I would still like to be out enjoying birds and nature. And so if we can work to making the outdoors and the birding community more welcoming and inclusive and accessible for everybody, we all get to benefit from that. And if that's the reason that you're interested in this, purely for your own benefit, great. This is about all of us. So through education, outreach and advocacy, Birdability works to ensure the birding community and the outdoors are welcoming, inclusive, safe and accessible for everybody. We focus on people with mobility challenges, blindness or low vision, chronic illness, intellectual or developmental disabilities, mental illness, and those who are neurodivergent, deaf or hard of hearing, or who have other health concerns. But inherently, our work can also benefit parents with strollers. That's a mobility challenge. Grandparents with toddlers, older people who are just slowing down, people with new medical diagnoses, folks with dodgy knees. This includes me. I woke up one morning 2 years ago and I couldn't straighten my right knee, and it has not been diagnosed yet. That summer, 2 years ago, I was hobbling around. It was really hard to walk. Even just going a mile was much, much more effort and painful than I'd ever had. I'd never had that kind of mobility challenge before, and it impacted my ability to go birding. So you never know when this might be relevant. Again, this is our future selves. By the way, my background as an occupational therapist is in blindness and low vision services. And low vision, I know on the surface seems really vague in general English, but it's actually a really specific clinical term that's quite a particular kind of diagnostic category. And basically, it's the point at which an eye condition that you have, glasses don't help anymore, but you still have some vision. In addition to current birders, we strive to introduce birding to people with disabilities and other health concerns who are not yet birders, so they too can experience the joys of birding. And there are so many people and places and ways we can do this. We are excited about reaching out to local disability support groups, such as those for folks with spinal cord injuries or amputations or multiple sclerosis, or those who have survived a stroke. Veterans, my husband is in the Army, I'm an Army spouse, and he's a combat veteran. I know from firsthand experience that birding and time in nature is really good for him with combat experience. bird festivals. We're really excited to have accessible and inclusive bird outings at bird festivals. There's a lot of big ones, there's a lot of small ones. And in fact, next week, Birdability will be at our first official bird festival in Tucson, Arizona, which is really exciting, holding outings there. Kids disabled camps, centres for independent living, schools for the deaf and blind, rehabilitation hospitals, the Easter Seals, assisted living centres, and we're excited about linking up with Scouting and 4-H groups to ensure that they are inclusive and accessible in what they do, that they get to learn about birding, and also because some of this work could be service projects for these young people, because birding is for everybody and everybody. The best we can be is waiting for us in nature. You're about to meet virtually Virginia Rose. She's the founder of Birdability, and she said this, and she says she found her best self through birding in nature. So if this is true, and it very well might be, shouldn't everybody have the opportunity to find their best selves in nature? So here's Virginia. Virginia is from Austin, Texas, and she's a retired high school English teacher, and she's been a birder for 17 years. She had a horse riding accident when she was 14 years old, which resulted in a T10 spinal cord injury. So that means she can no longer feel or use her legs, and she uses a manual wheelchair to help her get around. Without her here in this presentation, the best way I know how to introduce her is through this video that was part of an article that National Audubon put out about Virginia 3 years ago. It's really something that got the ball rolling with all this work.
I was driving home one day from school, and I heard there was going to be a lecture sponsored by Travis Audubon on the breeding success of the house finch, and I thought, that sounds interesting, and I went. And I loved it. I had so much fun in the lecture, and I came out and I called my mom right away.
Oh, sorry.
I said, Mom, why didn't you tell me I was a nerd? My life would have been so much easier. Then I started signing up for all the Travis Audubon classes. The field trip leaders never skipped a beat. They just picked me up and took me with them. Literally picked me up. And I've been with them now for about 15 years. Now I'm on the board of directors. Oh, I led beginning bird walks for them for 7 years. That's the great crested flycatcher. Brr, brr, brr. Ta ta ta. So then I started thinking about how can I take that wonderful experience and give it to other people in wheelchairs, other people who don't know that they can do it. And so I started thinking, I need to form an organization called Birdability. And then my job is to find as many physically challenged people and help introduce them to birding. Get them situated in Austin with the accessible places that I have already found. And get that pilot program kind of functioning that way. And then take it to the national parks, so that they know that this is a viable population that needs to be well represented. And birding offers you a way to belong to a group who's outside, learning, practicing conservation, and contributing. I mean, it's a community just waiting for you. I'm excited about the prospects of not only getting physically challenged people in parks, but getting physically challenged kids in parks. Because I just feel like that can be such an important springboard for them into their lives. The reason why I love using a manual chair is it's my way of walking. This is walking me. You know, I've been in a chair 45 years. You have to go for something challenging, something you may not be able to do, and then figure it out. And the amazing thing is that 9 times out of 10, you will figure it out. And the feeling that comes from having figured it out is so empowering and so great. Well, I can just tuck that away as a great accomplishment. I said, of course it's hard, but that's where your feeling of accomplishment comes from.
So that's Virginia. And if some of you all are in Austin, perhaps you know Virginia personally. I've been working with her really closely for the last 12 months, and only on Monday did I get to meet her for the first time in person. I'm actually in her house right now, and it's pretty cool because she's exactly as amazing and delightful as you might think from that short introduction. A powerhouse. So when she started birding, there were a few difficulties that she encountered as a wheelchair user. Parking could be a real issue. Gates, not always designed to let wheelchair users through. Bathrooms, there's a whole lot goes into the physical accessibility of bathrooms. Steps and curbs, railings. Most safety barriers or railings have not been designed to allow someone who's seated in a wheelchair to see beyond them. Most of them have a thick, like, top railing that's completely obstructive, which doesn't help you see birds. Mud and sand, and in Texas, cattle guards, cactus spines, and cow patties. And as Virginia will say, cow patties on your boots are one thing, but cow patties on your wheels and so on your hands are quite a different story. And all of these things contributed to a lack of independence for Virginia. She will tell you, and as an occupational therapist, I would advocate too, that independence is often really important for a lot of folks. Yeah, okay, you can ask for help. Sometimes that's available and willing to be given, but there's so much more joy and empowerment when you can do the thing completely by yourself. And Virginia wants to be unattended when she's out in nature and birding. She wants to have that choice. So this is really important. So why did she keep doing it? Because difficulty and uncertainty lead to empowerment and joy. And I really love this photo. I think it shows a lot of empowerment and joy. This is Virginia and her sister and her van. They'd just been looking for a Swainson's warbler in East Texas and they'd found it. So they were really excited. While we're on this photo, this is Virginia's van. Yes, she drives. It's quite possible for someone who can't use their legs to drive with different modifications to the vehicle and hand controls. You might notice that this van has a side entry ramp, and this is why you may have seen sometimes at supermarkets and other public places, there's accessible parking spots and there's van accessible parking spots. And the van accessible parking spots have that wide side aisle that has those diagonal lines across it, telling you don't park here, because if Virginia can't deploy her ramp out the side and have enough space to get on and off that ramp in her chair, she can't get in or out of her van. So if she's unable to do that, no matter how wonderfully accessible that birding location is, she can't go. So please, if you take nothing away from this presentation, please never park in a van accessible space or in that side aisle. If you never park in the side aisle anyway, but never park in a van accessible space if you don't need it, because if someone can't have that extra side space, then they can't go to that place at all. So the joy. She discovered learning all about birds, and she discovered friendships. She got to travel. This is up at the biggest week in American birding, a big bird festival in Ohio. But travel also includes going to a park in your city or town that you've never been to and traveling there and exploring that place. Physical health benefits from wheeling around, being active, the core strength related to having to look through binoculars and maneuver around uneven terrain. Confidence because she could do these things, independence, community, the sense of community, belonging to people with similar values. What an amazing thing. A purpose, thing to look forward to on the weekends, and of course the birds themselves. And all of these created empowerment and joy for Virginia, and that's what she wanted to share with other folks. As she says, no one can predict what an individual with an accessibility challenge can or cannot do. Not even sometimes that person themselves until they try. So what things make up a truly accessible trail? There are a lot of websites that will say, oh, we have an accessible trail at this location, but there is definitely a difference between an accessible trail and an actually accessible trail. So parking is one, preferably with van accessible parking spaces. Finding out trail information ahead of time. Sometimes that comes in the form of a map and a really great sign at the trailhead. That can also come on the park's website describing what they have. And there's another way too, the Birdability Map, and we'll get there in a minute. Most of these photos were taken at the Echo River Spring Trail at Mammoth Cave National Park in Kentucky. My favorite accessible trail. It's really awesome and it's so birdie. This trail sign tells you in great detail the length, the surface, the tread width, the gradient or the slope, the steepness, and the cross slope, which is how much of an angle you're on as you're traveling down the trail. And that is important. If you use a mobility device like a wheelchair or a walking frame, if you're on a funny angle as you're moving down the trail, you're at risk of tipping and falling over. And that's a safety issue and not desirable at all. So knowing this information is really, really valuable for a lot of people, especially people like me with my dodgy knee. As I was learning what I could do with my knee in the new way it operated, knowing the steepness and what the trail was going to be like helped me decide if it was worth even trying. In fact, this trail was very much worth even trying. And I only did because I had this information in front of me to make that decision in an informed way. Bathroom accessibility, so stall size, if the doorway opens all the way up, if the sinks are low enough so someone in a wheelchair can actually reach the sink and the taps or the faucets. Toilet paper dispensers, sometimes they're so far away, okay, I can lean forward and catch them, but if someone has balance issues, vestibular issues, a higher level spinal cord injury that's knocked out their core strength and they can't lean forward without toppling over, the toilet paper needs to be within reach. These portaloos at Mammoth Cave, I was really excited about because often you see a regular size portaloo, but some people need that accessible portaloo. And if you just get the accessible portaloo from the start, everyone can use that. I don't need an accessible portaloo, but I'd prefer to use one because they tend to be less hot and stuffy inside and kind of a bit less gross. And folks like Virginia can use them. So if you're ever involved in making those decisions, just get an accessible one and everyone can use that. Interpretive signs. There's a few things that go into this too. Good contrast between the color of the text and the background. Whether the trail is paved all the way up to the sign so someone can actually get up to it and read it. If it's at a height that someone who's seated can read. This sign has a tactile component. That top right-hand bit is 3D. It's the texture of the sycamore tree's bark. There's a bunch of them on this floodplain, and it's inviting you to touch that. I have no technical reason to need to touch that, but I really like touching things to learn, and I found that really engaging. But a lot of folks who are blind or have low vision, little kids, people with print disabilities or cognitive disabilities, that's going to be a really great engaging opportunity to have a tactile component on the sign. And the other thing, speaking of folks who are blind or have low vision, is to make sure that interpretive information is available in an audio format. Sometimes some visitor centres will have those little wands that you can borrow and, you know, plug in the number and listen, like in an art gallery or a museum. That's great if the visitor centre's open. And the visitor centre is a bit of a ways away from this trailhead. Another option is having QR codes on the sign that someone can scan with their phone and the audio kind of pops up and they can listen on their phone. That's great if there's cell reception. And at Mammoth Cave, there is no cell reception. option. So the option that I think is absolutely fantastic and the best always is the tower, the audio tower that's next to this sign. It has a solar panel. It's always going to be working. Doesn't matter if the visitor centre is closed, and you can just press the button and it will read aloud to you on the sign. Again, the cool thing about inclusivity is that even though you might think this is serving folks who are blind or have low vision, there's all these other people who benefit from that too, like folks with print disabilities like dyslexia, or maybe an older person with some dementia and reading is getting a bit tricky, folks who maybe can understand spoken English but can't understand it when it's written down. When I was there and I listened to the sign, I learned how to say those plant names in Latin. Don't test me on that, but that was cool. So when you're inclusive and working on this accessibility stuff, there's so many more people that benefit from it than the folks that you might think. Maintenance is really important. No matter how wonderfully accessible your trail or birding location is, if you don't maintain it, it will not stay that way. Vegetation can encroach on the trail, impacting the tread width, which is important, especially if you use a mobility device. It needs to be wide enough for you to get through and wide enough to pass other people without getting off the trail, because you might not be able to get back on it. Vegetation can also include low-hanging branches or tree trunks going up and over. And if you're sighted, you might just automatically walk around that, no worries. But if you're blind or have low vision, getting knocked on the head by branches is really not fun at all. Snow, yeah, usually relevant in Texas, but ploughing is really important, and knowing the ploughing schedule, if that can be on the website, folks can make a decision. Oh, it snowed on Friday evening. They're not going to plough it again till Monday. Okay, I won't be able to access it over the weekend. I won't spend an hour driving to get there and just be disappointed. And leaves. I've been to a wonderfully accessible trail that had a huge, like 3 or 4 inch carpet of pine needles down on the trail, and it's a trip hazard, it's a slip hazard. But folks with mobility devices, the little wheels, the casters on the front of a wheelchair or in a walker, or someone using crutches, or someone with gait difficulties because they have Parkinson's disease, that thick mat of vegetation can make the place inaccessible and unsafe for them. Railings. Now, we talked a little bit about railings. Virginia, as a seated person, her so many railings she can't see beyond. This viewpoint at this trail at Mammoth Cave, the first time I walked past it, I thought, oh no, this beautiful, wonderful, amazing trail, some horrible person has already come and vandalized their viewpoint. That's terrible. And I got closer and I discovered that those 2 sections that look like they've been damaged are actually perspex. Thick perspex, completely clear. Everyone can see the view. Little kids sitting in a stroller, toddlers don't have to look through the jail bars of the safety barrier. Virginia in a wheelchair, me resting my dodgy knee on that very much appreciated bench. Everyone can see when you remove barriers like that. Wonderful, wonderful. Last 2, steps or other obstacles. Just 1 step. Virginia tells me that a lot of times she'll ring a place and ask them about their accessibility, and they say, oh, there's just 1 step, you'll be fine. Well, 1 step can be the difference between being able to access that place and needing help, which is undesirable. But it's also worth noting that not everybody with an access challenge needs the same things. I can manage a step. I can also manage those routes. Virginia probably could if she had to manage those routes, but most folks in annual wheelchairs wouldn't necessarily be interested in potentially falling over and hurting themselves trying to negotiate those routes on that path. So knowing the conditions ahead of time is the really important thing here. And bird blinds, there's a bunch that goes into whether a bird blind is accessible or not. The surface used, the doors, if there's a door, if there's shade provided or not, the window height, like the railing height, if someone can see out of it, or even get close enough that they can see down instead of just out because they're sort of further away because of a shelf. There's a bunch in that. Anyway, for all the things that I'm going to be sharing with you in this presentation, there is so much more I wish I had time to tell you about. And it's up on our website. So you can get hold of that information if you'd like. The web address is on the bottom of every slide. So if you're interested in learning more, please check this out. There's plenty more to learn. But now that you know a little bit about some of the key things that make up a truly accessible birding location, the Birdability Map is our strategy to help folks know that accessibility information ahead of time. This is a project that we work with in collaboration with National Audubon Society. And anyone can contribute to the Birdability Map. And you just got a whole lot of really good information, I hope, that will make you even more equipped to do this. But you don't actually need to attend one of these presentations to be able to contribute to the Birdability Map. The Birdability Site Review is a survey that's designed to be as straightforward as possible. You're not asked to make any judgment calls like, could a wheelchair user manage that slope? Because how should you know? Even if you know a few folks who are manual wheelchair users, disability is not a monolith, and lots of different factors contribute to whether one wheelchair user or another could or couldn't negotiate that slope today. So we are not asked to tell us that sort of stuff. You're just asked to tell us what is or isn't there. And if you're a birder, you have pretty good observation skills already. So you just have to let us know what's there and what's not, and let the person later make their own decisions about whether they would like to go. When you visit the Birdability Map, any of these yellow diamonds you can click on, and the information that someone has submitted will pop up so that you can find out that detailed information. The site review, when you click on it, it leads you through questions like this. Now, actually, awkward, last Thursday, we finally released a new Birdability Site Review that's more updated and expanded. And the format of the electronic site review looks slightly different than this, but I need to change my slides. That was a monster project, and so it's so awesome that it's out now, because you can now also get hold of a downloadable printable checklist if you want to take that with you out on site, and that's screen reader accessible PDF as well. So anyway, whether you print it and fill it out by hand, or whether you fill it out on your phone or your tablet, if you're out there on location, if you do that, you'll submit it there. If you fill it out on paper, you'll have to come home and fill it out on the computer, and it looks a little bit like this. And then when you click submit, it populates the map, which is pretty awesome, instant gratification. And then you can click on the yellow diamond and see all this information to help you or someone else decide if that's a location that you would like to visit. So please help this resource grow. It's really exciting. It's a really interesting way to learn about these accessibility features of birding locations. By the way, birding locations, trails, bird blinds, observation platforms, feeder stations, car birding sites, anywhere you can go birding, that is reasonably accessible. Most places are not like 1000% perfectly accessible. Most are not, but as long as it's reasonably accessible, that's what we want to see on the Birdability Map, because people can then make their own informed decisions about visiting. All right, a complete change of direction here. I'm on a bit of a mission to redefine birding. Historically, there was a slight difference between birding and bird watching, and I propose that we redefine birding as the act of enjoying wild birds, because when we do this, the emphasis on watching with your eyes is a little bit reduced, because folks who are blind or have low vision don't necessarily watch birds, but they can certainly enjoy them by sound. But when birding is defined that broadly, it includes all different ways of engaging and enjoying wild birds. You don't have to be walking down a trail. You don't have to be keeping a list. You don't even have to know the names of the bird to enjoy it. That's not actually that important. You don't need binoculars. You don't have to be able to afford an expensive scope to enjoy wild birds. You don't need to be in a group. you can do it however you want. And if the definition of birding is the act of enjoying wild birds, then anyone who enjoys wild birds is a birder. Congratulations, welcome on board. What an inclusive way to welcome more people into this really wonderful hobby. So if you think that sounds good, I invite you to go ahead and just start using that, because language is always evolving, and we have the power to make our own choices about the language we use to describe ourselves. So there you go. Of course, if you would rather describe yourself as a bird watcher, you're welcome to do that too. I'm not telling you how you should identify, but this is my proposal. Take it or leave it. So my suggestion, again, everyone has their own power and autonomy to identify as they wish. But from Birdability's perspective, this is what we are doing. So instead of talking about bird watchers, we're talking about everyone being a birder. And instead of talking about bird walks, we talk about bird outings and field trips. Now, it's funny, Virginia and I often have this discussion because she does not walk with a spinal cord injury, but she talks about bird walks. So everyone's welcome to do whatever they like, but if you're someone who's involved in hosting these events at an organizational level, it's really, really easy just to switch out bird walk for bird outing. And if that means that one or two more people feel a little bit more invited to attend, isn't that great? I don't mean to be cancel culturing and like super politically correct, just that if we're a little bit more intentional about the words we use, we might be able to welcome a bunch more folks in. However, now again, everyone's allowed to identify as they like, but if you if you're not part of the disability community, I just wanted to let you know about this. Generally speaking, handicapped and impaired are seen as out of date and not really the words anymore. It's okay to describe someone as having a disability or being disabled. Historically, they've been seen as dirty words and something to be ashamed of, but there's nothing wrong with having a disability. It's a normal part of the human experience. And so if there's nothing wrong with that, there's no reason to be ashamed of it. So the disability community is quite happy to be described as the disability community in general. Again, everyone has different experiences and preferences, and there seems to be a difference in generational attitude, and Virginia uses handicapped about herself all the time. But if you haven't got it, if you're not sure where to start with disabled or has a disability. That's generally the way to go. Normal, however, in this context, normal is not a good word. What is normal? Possibly what you mean is the person is able-bodied or non-disabled, or they're sighted, or they're hearing, or they're neurotypical. If you don't have a disability, don't say you're normal in that way. In that context, that's not good. Also, wheelchair bound. Oh no, that phrase is so disempowering. The implication is that someone who is wheelchair bound can do nothing without their wheelchair. They are restricted and defined, and no. Let's describe folks as being wheelchair users. They use a wheelchair, like I use a car to get from A to B. And because we're losing impaired, vision impaired is generally seen as not really a great phrase, although certainly some people use it about themselves. Describe folks as being blind or having low vision. Again, that low vision thing is a technical terminology, even though it sort of doesn't look like it. So it's not enough to just think you're being inclusive. You have to be intentionally inclusive. Usually this takes more time and more effort, and sometimes this takes more money, but that's the difference between making an assumption, why wouldn't they know that they're invited, to actively going out and inviting people directly. That's being intentionally inclusive. So one way you can be intentionally inclusive is to include detailed information in a bird outing event description. Rather than just saying, we're going on an accessible outing, what do you mean by accessible? What does that entail for you? You can be a bit more specific about that, as well as the date, day, time and meeting place, which most bird outing descriptions would have. State overtly that it's an accessible, inclusive outing. Tell people if beginners are welcome or if small children are welcome to attend. Provide detailed information about the physical accessibility of the locations that will be visited, and the easiest way to do that is to fill out a Birdability Site review and link directly to it from your outing event description. But also include a few of the key details in the event description, like the distance you're going to cover, if there's shade, the gradient, the surface. All of this information is on our website under Writing Bird Outing Event Descriptions in the Guidance Documents tab. Tell folks if loaner equipment will be available, like binoculars or other adaptive birding equipment, and what kind it is and how many, so they know if they're going to have to fight for the 2 loaner binoculars or if there'll be enough for everyone to go around. And provide contact information for their leaders, and describe briefly if they have any experience holding these outings or if they have their own accessibility challenge, because we know that folks who've gone on outings with Virginia have shown up, they're wheelchair users too, and they've shown up and they've seen Virginia in her manual wheelchair is the outing leader and thought, oh, she's definitely going to know what I need. I'm so relieved. I definitely feel more comfortable about this. Of course, walking people, many of whom have their own access challenges, or maybe not, can certainly lead inclusive and accessible outings, but just explaining that if they have any direct relevance to it is really, really, really cool to know. When you provide that contact information for leaders, not only is that helpful in case something goes wrong the morning of and someone needs to tell you or you need to tell them the change of plans, but you can invite potential participants to contact the outing leaders and ask any specific questions they have about this outing or if it's right for them. Again, that's the intentionally inclusive thing, not just assuming they could get in touch if they wanted to, but actively inviting them. Hey, if you need to ask questions, here's my email address. And then on a bird outing, now these things are written up from the perspective of a bird outing leader, but most of them apply to every birder or nature lover in some way or another. So what can you do? You can smile and say hello to other birders. It has to be the easiest way to help folks feel comfortable and welcome. The saying hello bit is important if someone is blind or has low vision and they can't see your smile. So verbalize that as well. Include a welcome statement at the beginning of your outing, including your pronouns and maybe some minor behavioural expectations. It might sound a little bit like, hi everyone, my name's Freya. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm really excited to go birding with you today. Thanks for coming. I don't know everything there is about birds. No one does. So if you have any questions, please don't be afraid to ask. And if you can't get hold of me, ask anyone around you and they'll be happy to help you if they know. Hint, hint, everybody else, you're supposed to be friendly and helpful. Don't single someone out because of a difference unless it is relevant. And if you have to do that, do it one-on-one. If someone shows up to their first bird outing and the leader says, oh my gosh, there's someone here using a power wheelchair, that's so exciting. How awkward might that feel for that person in the power wheelchair? Just be cool, just be cool. It may be relevant though, if there's steps coming up, and ideally up the back of the group when no one else is paying attention, the outing leader might say to that person, hey, look, I know there's some steps coming up. Let me know what you need from me, or we can figure it out when you get there, or, you can start game planning it then at the back of the group, one-on-one, instead of in front of everybody. Offer help, but be prepared to graciously accept no. A lot of well-meaning people see folks, especially using mobility devices, and they assume they need help, and so often they don't need help. They're perfectly independent by themselves, and they jump in and they cause problems. Don't do that. Offer it, but if the person says no, don't get all kind of hoiked up about it, like, oh well, so sorry, I was just trying to be nice. That's not cool. Don't do that. Just be like, hey, yeah, no worries. If you do need help, let me know. I'd happy to help you later if you need it. If they say they do want help, don't assume you know what help they need. Everyone is different. They have their own preferences and needs. And so the next question from you needs to be, what would you like me to do? And let them guide you, because they are the expert in what they need. Believe someone if they identify a bird. Trust, but verify. It is incredibly discouraging to be on a bird outing and say, oh, hey everyone, there's an American redstart over there. And for someone to turn and look at you and say, oh, really? I know a lot of different folks have similar experiences. As someone originally from Australia, because I have a different accent, that's my assumption. Maybe it's because I'm younger and female, but there's lots of stereotypes going on, and it's really discouraging when it happens. Yeah, okay, I have a different accent than you. That doesn't mean I know nothing about birds in North America. So instead of assuming someone's wrong, trust but verify. It's a tiny attitude adjustment, and that looks like, oh, cool, an American redstart. Really? That's amazing. Let's see. And then go look. And if it's not, you can encouragingly explain and help educate that person why it was a different bird. And be actively anti-racist. That's not the same thing as not being racist. Being anti-racist is working intentionally to combat, if you are white or white passing, combat any of the systemic racism that's just part of so many cultures and societies, especially in the US. This includes also being anti-homophobic and anti-ableist. Now, I'm white, Virginia is white. If we only focused on people with disabilities and other health concerns who were white and straight and cisgender, we would not be fulfilling our mission. We would not be inclusive. And there's this thing called intersectionality, which means that many people have multiple identities. And there are people who are Black and wheelchair users, and there are people who are gay and have chronic fatigue. And so if you're going to be inclusive, you have to be inclusive of everybody. And so you have to be addressing these other systemic barriers as well, not just the ones that are associated with folks who are white and straight and cisgender and have the access challenge. Don't force someone to opt out. Go out of your way to allow them to opt in. I'm going to race through these so we have a little minute for questions at the end, but there's a lot more on our website about what welcoming and inclusive organisations can do to help this. You can have an inclusion and diversity statement on your website and use that to hold your employees, volunteers and organisations accountable for the actions you will take to ensure you are inclusive and diverse and accessible in your events and in your operating. You can hold accessible bird outings as part of your regular programming. Don't do it once and think that's enough. That's kind of tokenistic. Do it regularly. Once a month would be great. And include all that accessibility information. Include image descriptions for social media posts. Image descriptions describe in text what the photo or the graphic is showing visually. That's really important for folks who use screen reader software, which reads aloud text off a computer, but it can't read a photo. So you have to tell the software what the photo is showing. On a website, that's called alt text or alternative text. There's more about this on our website if you're not sure. Include closed captions for all webinars and meetings, even if no one has asked for them. Thank you for doing that for this webinar. There are a lot of folks, not just folks who are deaf or hard of hearing. There are a lot of different folks who benefit from closed captions, including but not limited to folks who might have some difficulty interpreting an Australian accent. Closed captions are so great, but it's really exhausting to have to advocate for this for yourself over and over again. Will there be closed captions? Will you have closed captions? I want to go to that, but unless there are closed captions, there's no point in me attending. So include that in the description of the event. Closed captions will be available. Great, now I can opt in instead of being forced to opt out. Remove financial barriers to access whenever possible. Okay, it's not always possible, but sometimes you can have a pay what you wish or a suggested donation, or you can get sponsorships or grants to help cover that cost so that folks can do the thing even if they couldn't afford to pay to do the thing. And provide honorariums for speakers or consultants. This is really important. An honorarium demonstrates that you respect that person's time and expertise or experience. It's not fair to ask someone, especially someone from a historically marginalised community, to spend their own time and effort educating or entertaining you for free. That's not fair. That's not okay. And this applies too if you're part of a team helping improve the accessibility of a trail and you invite folks out who have a disability to come and check it out and give you feedback. Pay them for their time and expertise. Don't just expect them to do that for free. That's not fair. There's more on our website about that. Yes, that costs money, so budget for it. On our website, we have some resources for birders with disabilities and other health concerns, and more is being added all the time. The Birdability Map is a big one. We have a webpage with some ideas for some adaptive birding equipment, including Virginia's wheelchair-mounted scope, which is very cool. We have a Facebook group called Birdability Birders. We use the Birdability blog to amplify the experiences of birders who have accessibility challenges, as a resource for beginner birders with similar access challenges, and for those folks who are able-bodied or sighted or hearing or neurotypical to learn more about this from another person. We have virtual programs like virtual bird outings, so you can go birding even from home if you can't get out yourself. We have ideas and tips and links to blogs. And as I said, more is being added all the time. We've been going at this for 6 months as a nonprofit, so there's a lot more coming. If you'd like to get involved, you can contribute site reviews to the Birdability Map. You already know exactly how to do that. If you really want to be engaged in this work, you can become a Birdability captain. There are volunteers who we work to empower to do this work in their own communities. You can advocate for accessibility improvements in your own community. That's so helpful, and so often city councils or state parks or nature centres won't even realise that the safety barrier they had was creating an access challenge because they had no idea. And if you just explain to them cheerfully how they can improve it, often they'll be so grateful because they want people to visit their site. They want people to be able to enjoy it. So that's really, really helpful. Please share our resources with anyone who you think might benefit. That's why we have them. Sign up for a monthly newsletter. You can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter at Birdability. Please share our posts. Again, that's why we make them. We're trying to educate and help folks learn more. So please share that out. And you can donate to help support our work as a brand new nonprofit. Donations are really, really valuable. And this is in fact inaccurate, but we're running our first fundraising campaign, our Founders Circle campaign, with a significant donation. You can be remembered in perpetuity on our website for helping us fledge as a nonprofit. It's going until the end of August, even though that says the end of July. So if you'd like to learn more about that, we're inviting interested individuals, organisations and companies who see value in our work and who have directly benefited from our work. We hope that they will support us to continue this work as part of our Founders Circle. So there's more about that on our website as well, because birding is for everybody and everybody. My email address is info@birdability.org. I'm basically away from my desk for the next 3.5 weeks, so please bear with me if it takes me a little while to get back to you while we're out at this festival, but you can email me with any questions. Check out our website again and social media at Birdability, and thanks.
Thank you so much, Freya. We do have a few questions in the chat, so I'm gonna go ahead and get started. So the first one is from Trudy Smith with Buffalo Bayou. And she asked, we would love to partner with your organization. Would you consider a field trip to Houston for a birding tour?
Yes, send me an email. but it'll be a little bit before I can get back to emails properly. So yeah, that sounds great. Please send me an email. Or by the way, our website, if you forget my email address, the contact us form that goes straight into my inbox. So
wonderful. Our next question is from Christy Jones, and she asks, what mileage for a 2-hour bird survey would you suggest for those in a wheelchair those in a wheelchair might be interested in?
A bird survey, like a bird outing, like a, I'm guessing.
That is my guess. I am not sure.
Sure. Yeah, let's go with that. So there's so many different folks who use wheelchairs, and there's power wheelchairs, and there's which use a battery, and there's manual wheelchairs that you either self-propel or someone pushes you in. There are so many different folks who use these that is a really, really hard question to answer, because every one of those people will have a different capacity to travel along a trail. Some folks, half a mile, that's really good. Virginia wishes there was more accessible trails. She's really fit and healthy. She has no other health concerns except for the fact that she uses a manual wheelchair. She has nothing else going on with her health-wise. And so she wishes there were more accessible trails that went for miles so she could keep exploring and keep birding. 3 miles is probably the maximum, especially if it's aimed at beginner birders who might not really want to be out there for that long. And maybe it's a thing that you play by ear during the outing, and the aim maybe was to go 2 miles, but if everyone wants to turn around after a mile, well, that'll still be 2 miles by the time you get back. So that's up to you. It depends a little bit. I'd start about a mile and a half, maybe 2, just as a starting place.
Okay, that is all I'm seeing in the chat right now for questions. If there's anyone who has any other questions, please feel free to put those in the chat as well.
I just saw from Rink that the evaluation is no longer accepting responses. So, okay, so if you go to birdability.org/map.
I think that's our evaluation.
Oh, that's your evaluation. Okay.
Yeah. I just put it in the chat, and now I'm double checking that I may have put last month's in there. So let me double check. I am so sorry if I did that. That's what happens when I have my electronic post-it ready at the beginning of the session. Apparently I missed that one. So if there's any other questions, please feel free to put those in the chat as well.
By the way, I started my journey in the US. I married an American soldier, and I started in San Antonio. So it's really cool to be presenting to folks in Texas, because 4 years ago we left Texas, and we've been stationed in other states around the US. So it's really awesome to see. I'm just reading through where everyone's from. I'm like, oh, Bastrop, oh, Balcones Canyonlands. Oh, yeah, that's not relevant to this topic. It just makes me really happy. So thank you all for coming and learning. I hope it was valuable. I hope you got something out of it. And I hope you can help us ensure that birding really is for everybody.
We do have a question now from April. She asks, are there grants to retrofit trails to make them more accessible?
Yes, there's plenty of them. That depends on where you are and a whole bunch of other stuff. So I don't have a list to give you for that. I would like to create one for our website. We've been busy doing other things at the moment, but there certainly are grants around relating to inclusion and access and getting more people out in nature and health and underserved communities, and all of those things are likely to fund potentially retrofitting trails to be more accessible. If you go through our access considerations guidance document and the Birdability Site review checklist, that you probably get a few ideas, or if you haven't got a few already from this presentation, about things you could do, just little bits and pieces that you could work on bit by bit. So you might be able to get smaller grants to help, rather than, you don't have to do like the whole thing all at once if that's not a possibility. So yeah, absolutely, there are grants around.
And Christy put in the chat a great point. Texas Parks and Wildlife does have a Rec Trails grant that you can use for these things. And actually, we are hosting a webinar with them in September on their rec grants process. So I am putting that link in the chat as well. So you all can learn how to apply for those grants. Okay, well, thank you everyone. We're at 3 o'clock. So thank you so much, Freya. It was a pleasure to have you present today. I look forward to our presentation this evening again. This will be put up on our YouTube channel tomorrow. I'll also email all of you the link as well. So if you have anyone who, as you're watching this today, you're like, oh, they really should have been at that presentation, please feel free to email it out. But thank you so much, everyone, and have a fantastic rest of your afternoon.
Thanks, y'all.